Hello, everybody. Welcome to our MuleRPA connector for IBMI, formerly known as AS400 systems. This will be a demo. In this demo, we are using a use case. This use case supposes that we are a distribution company and our warehouse management system is a commercial off-the-shelf IBMI-based application. We decide that we want to create a REST API that the external systems could call with order data and pass that information to the green screen ERP. We don't want to introduce another system, operate additional infrastructure, or invest heavily into specialized RPA tools. We just want to call the green screen apps directly from our Mule app and pass the data into it and get the results back. First, we'll be going over how to create an order this way. You can see here we are on a post request. The path will be /API customers, the order number, and then /orders. And you can see here the payload is an array of item objects. Each item object has an item number, name, quantity, and unit price. I feel like now it is important to go over the manual application for this Mule program, So first, it begins with logging in. And now the next step in order to create an order would be adding the libraries and calling the function needed. So I will quickly add these libraries. And now I will call the program used to create the order. You can see here, there's a spot for entering a customer number. We would just do a random number. And you can see here, we are brought to a sales order maintenance screen. You can see we can press F6 down here to add an order. And so we will do that. You can see we're provided with an item number screen, an item name screen, a quantity, and a unit price screen. So I will put dummy data in for all of that, and you can see we now will have to press F10 in order to create this order. You can see the order has been created. We are provided with an ERP order number. We are also given an order created success message at the bottom of the screen. We now press F12 to leave this screen, and we can press F3 to exit to the main home screen. Pretty simple, but as you guys could obviously tell, that was a little bit of a annoying, time-consuming, monotonous process. Now, this is where Mule comes in. You can see we have our post customers, customer ID orders flow here. All this does is execute our script and sets the payload to the successful order number and status. In our execute script module for our Mule IBMI AS400 RPA connector, you can see we are given a connector configuration. In this configuration, all the user has to do is provide their username and password along with the X and Y coordinates to those input fields on the screen. In addition to that, they need to provide a host, a port, and it is optional, but they can also provide an SSL type for a secure connection. For debugging, there's a debug mode that will print the screen to the console every time, as well as you can specify the reconnection times any time between the attempts. An initial key string is also something the user can provide. As you can see here, it says add level a panda and then add level info cdc com. And if you guys remember, those were the first libraries that we added going through the green screen process. What this initial key string is just allowing the connector to execute commands upon connection time only. So basically, since we need these libraries to create an order, but we only need to add them at the beginning of execution, this initial key string here ensures that these are only added once at the beginning of connection time. Now let's go back to our execute script module. You guys can see here that we have a key string, which is a comma separated list of commands and strings to be entered. So we will just go through this real fast. You can see here, call CDC order CMTC. What this does is this puts this string into the first input field, the default input field. And for us, that input field is just this one right here. Then we will press the enter key and we are brought to this set infield command. This will set the input field to the input field at x coordinate 29, y coordinate 10. Then we are met with this semicolon and then the string URI inside these triangle brackets. And you can see this URI corresponds to the URI inside of our input parameters. This lets our program know that an input parameter belongs in this spot. And so whatever value is left inside here as an input parameter will replace this whole section here. And so a string, which is the customer ID, is now placed in the new input field. We press enter, we press F6, and then we execute our Python macro. And so at this point in the string, we are now entering order items. And so this macro refers to the macro file here. And in order for the program to know where this macro file is at, besides just knowing the name, the file has to be placed in the source main resources folder. If we open this up, you can see that we are left with a TN5250J script. And so this is kind of for those more complex operations that require for loops, if statements, and such. You are able to code your own Python macros that can interact with the TN5250J library. This uses Jython as a base and uses the TN5250J library for everything else. And so you can see that for item in our items payload, and that refers to this one right here, we then set every field with the item number, item name, quantity, and unit price. So that will set the items for creation. We then press F10, which you guys remember is the create order. And then we have this get screen operation. What this does is this gets the rectangle that starts at x coordinate 15, y coordinate 4, has a length of 8 and a height of 1. And it will store it in the order number variable, which will be inside the attributes part of the Mule message. It does the same thing for the rectangle at x coordinate 2, y coordinate 24, with a length of 13 and a height of 1. And it grabs the order status from there. We then press F12 and F3 to get back to the main screen. And you can see here that the items that we referred to in that macro are actually from the payload items object. And so after walking through that, it's just a rehash of kind of what I showed you guys earlier. Let us actually try to make a request to the system. So you can see here, we use item number 7345 with this. And so let us just send that request. All right, and as you guys can see, we have sent the order create, and we now have a bunch of screens printed to our console. That's because we had the debug mode on. And you can see here, item name is the same that corresponds to our payload here. And you can also see that we have a successful response. Order created at order number 0015058. And so if we head back into our IVMI green screen and let us, again, if we go to customer number that we had just created, the customer number 7345. And you guys can see here that we have our order number, which corresponds to the response that we got from our postman. And if we press 5 to view our order details, you can see we have the item numbers that correspond, the item names that correspond, the quantity, and the unit prices that respond. And you can see corresponding to that. So let us head back into the AS400 system. We confirmed that that was correct. Now, let's say, for instance, that we want to edit an item or edit an item's status. We will call the same function as before. We will now put in the order that we just created. You can see here, we have our order that we just made. We will press 2 to edit it. And you can see that we can edit the delivery date or the order status. And let's say that I want to set this to not book, but we can say, let's just say progress. You can see now that we have a message for the order updated. And if we go to the previous screen, you can see it now says progress. Main screen. We also have an application to edit that as well. And so one quick second, we'll head to our post 15058. There we go. And so now this put application should do the same thing that we just carried out on the green screen, but it should set it to shipped. Now let's take a look inside Mule. This will be a little bit more of an overview because we went over kind of how the key string worked last time. You can see it's a little bit more of a complex flow for putting, but what's important is to look at the execute script, and you can see it is much of the same with our set in field, our macro, our input parameters, and our get screens. We can also take a look here to see that we have our input parameters, as well as our macro having its own input parameters and output parameter. And you can see the value found is used as an output parameter. Take a look at this Python macro. We can see that it is a little bit more complex. You can see we have if statements, while statements, so on and so forth. And what this does is it will search for the order number that we have specified right here. And so it will search for this order number. If an order is found, you guys can see that here in our input parameters, we have our status set from the payload status, and our date is set from payload date. Then we will set the status in the status field and set the date in the date field. And let us give this one a test. So we are updating the order we just created and setting it to shipped and setting this date to August 9th. So we are sending, and as you can see, we got a request, status, order, updated. Now let's take a look inside of the IBMI system. Let's go back to the order we have just created. And you can see here that the order status was set to shipped. The delivery date was also changed. So this means that the put and the post request, the update and the create request are both working. And as we go to the screen for debugging, you can also see that the screen was printed the entire time. And it has walked through all the steps that we walked through in that kind of walkthrough. So I hope you guys understood kind of how this demo went. If you guys have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you so much.